Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
All right, greetings everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode of IT Pro TV. I am your host, Daniel Lowry, and in today's episode, it is more in our A+ series, the 22902 exam for this one. And joining us in the studio yet again to lend his expertise on that topic, our good friend, Mr. Wes Bryan. Wes, we're glad to have you back, man. How's it going?
Man, it's going great. Looking forward to finishing up some of the Windows features in this last part here. Like Dan has been talking, and we've both been saying, you know, this is going to be a trilogy for sure. We're going to see if we can keep it under 17 episodes here, right? So yeah, we're going to go ahead. There are a few things that we kind of have to round off on this, with this objective here as we move through some of the different features that you can see inside of Windows. Keep in mind, as you can see, we're already into our third part, so we've already covered a lot of ground already, but there's a little bit of sidewalk left to travel there. So let's go ahead and we're going to dive right in. And we're going to talk about something known as Ready Boost when it comes to the different features of Windows. Now, so what is Ready Boost? Well, Ready Boost, this really came out in the days of Vista, and it is something that you could see inside of Windows Vista. You could see it inside of Windows 7 as well. Ready Boost is essentially a way that you could take an external USB flash drive and you could use it as your system memory. All right. When Vista first came out, it was very, very resource intensive. It still is resource intensive for that matter. And one of the things that they knew is that in the days of XP, you still had a lot of laptops around that might only have like 512 megs of RAM. Now, we don't think about that today. In fact, most of us probably have 4 times that in our phones alone and in our mobile devices, right? Essentially, Ready Boost is a technology that allows you to take flash memory and use it as though it's your system memory to try, for the purposes of kind of speeding up, if you will, your machine. Now, when we talk about Ready Boost, there are some things that we want to be aware of when it comes to Ready Boost. Ready Boost, you have to understand, is that capacity of the USB flash drive that you're going to use has to be at least 256 megabytes. And again, by today's standards, as of 2017, a lot of us don't even have USB thumb drives that are really that small. If we do, or they're in a box somewhere collecting dust, right? So very basically, again, we could extend that functionality into the USB thumb drive, using it as an additional amount of your system memory. All right, some of the other things too to keep in mind is that with the Ready Boost requirements, the thumb drive had to support 2.5 megabyte transfers per second in throughput, and support for 4K random reads. All right. Now, it also had to have 1.75 megabytes per second throughput for 1 megabyte random writes as well. So you did have some specifications that you needed to be able to were required for the USB flash drive. So that's a little bit about Ready Boost. And again, it's not really so necessary today when we have solid state drives inside of our systems today that are really, really ultra fast, if you will. It was beneficial more so for older systems, especially coming out of XP, because XP didn't require a lot of the resources that Vista did when you can see the systems with 512 megs of RAM. All right, so some of the other things that we have to talk about is something known as compatibility mode. Compatibility mode is a good feature because, well, as we've talked about in other parts here in the Windows features, we mentioned something known as the user account control. And the user account control brought in a completely new, underlying security architecture. And the problem with that is some of the applications, when we talk about compatibility going from XP, we still had line of business applications that, well, people didn't want to let go, right? If you think about spending, a couple $100s out of your own pocket, right, for an application that you're going to use in the home environment, you're probably saying, well, that's a good bit of money that you're spending on an application, so you really want to get as much of the lifetime you can out of that application without having to upgrade to spending another couple $100, right, to support Vista, Windows 7, if you will, Windows 8.1. even more so if you had a line of business application within your company that could probably cost you thousands of dollars, right?
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds
even.
of thousands,
Yeah.
right? You know, so you want, you know, businesses wanted a way that they could continue using the functionality of those what are called LOB applications, line of business applications. So Windows brings in something known as compatibility mode. Now, compatibility mode, honestly, guys, to make it really easy, it just allows you to run your application in the context of an earlier operating system to try to mimic the architecture that the operating system was running.
Is this
for
through
that
like an
application.
emulation? How did they accomplish that? Is that what they did?
You know, underneath the hardware, I am really not sure. I
I've
don't know
never
if
heard
it does,
either.
You know, yeah, I think because we have
There's
certain.
your homework.
There we go. We have different folder structures, if you will, and that was one of the things. Like, so for instance, when we talk about file paths and folder structures, in the days of XP, your user profile would be in / documents and settings / the user profile, right, the username. Well, in Vista, and I could go, or Windows 7, they're both the same. In fact, from Vista on, the folder structure was completely different. In fact, if I show you my Windows 7 machine here, and we open up our Windows Explorer, we get into Computer, Local Disk C, you'll see that we have here, in fact, let me change this a little bit. Notice we have C:, that is the root of the drive here, users, and let me go ahead and dive down in here, right? And these were are where the user profiles were. In the days of XP, again, it would have been C:, / documents and settings, and then / whatever the username was. So a completely different file structure. And you're probably right in the fact that it's doing some kind of emulation as well as in the background folder redirection, where it makes it appear to the application is that those folder paths and structures are the same, right? So how would I use, if I was going to use a compatibility mode, how would I use that? Well, I've actually got an application here, and I think this is a SolarWinds product here, Manage Engine, Windows Health Monitor, right? And if I right-click on this application, right, and I choose Properties, you'll see that in the Properties of this application, I have what's known as the Compatibility tab, right? You have a few different tabs here, right? You have the Security tab, which shows your permissions, if you will, the general details of the application itself, digital signatures, which is just a security stamp on it that says, hey, we can verify that in this case, this came from Zoho Corporation, right? So it's a little security information proving that the identity of who the manufacturer is of this application. Previous versions, this is where we talked about in a former, or in another part of this about the volume shadow copy service and being able to restore your file to an earlier point in time. But more so for us, we want this compatibility mode. As they introduce things like the user account control, that could break some of these applications that really weren't expecting anything with the user account control. And what I mean by that is they were expecting to have access to the registry and be able to manipulate it at will. Well, when the user account control came out, it protects the registry and it blocks that being able to write and make modifications, and that could cause an application to either just have, you know, a problematic functionality or really not function at all. So what you could do here is you could see that in compatibility mode here, I can run this program in a compatibility mode for, could be emulation, could be folder redirection, maybe making it mimic the platform essentially that you would want to run it on, right? So you could see XP with Service Pack 3, and I believe there's a Service Pack 2 probably in here because that was a major change in Windows XP. And notice that we can even do it in the context of a server operating system, and some of them going all the way back to Windows 95. And I would say if you still have an application around and you're in the Windows 7 and beyond days and you want to run it as a compatibility for Windows 95, it's probably time to upgrade. But you know, I'm not paying your paying the price of the software, so maybe you
Got that original version of Quake I need to run.
That's right. You know, you might, you know, or if you're a retro gamer,
yeah.
Hey, you know, if you're a retro gamer and you expected it to run, you know, in some of these older operating systems, but notice we can run it in the context, you know, in the compatibility mode for earlier operating systems. And that's a good thing. And it's definitely, as much as we kind of joke around here, it's good to have. And when you're paying the price for the application, whether it's the home user or it's the business user, like Dan said, upwards of $100,000 or hundreds of thousands of dollars for the application, just gives you the ability to extend the lifespan of that application without having to upgrade later. All right, now we've got some other things here too as well, and one of these I don't really have a demonstration for you on. I try to demonstrate as many of these as possible, but this one's something known as Virtual XP mode. It's also about compatibility. You would have applications that the compatibility mode that we just showed you, weren't really feasible, would not allow the application to function correctly. So what they did is they used a virtualization technology. And what we mean by virtualization is the ability for the operating system to run within an operating system, right? Or we talk about virtualization on a hardware platform. That's the ability of two operating systems to simultaneously be controlling the hardware, unlike something like multi-boot. When you have a multi-boot solution, what you end up having is one operating system boots up, it controls the hardware, which essentially is what an operating system allows us to do. Then once you're done using that operating system, you shut it down and you boot and select into the second operating system. It comes online. It takes control of the hardware. But in a multi-boot situation, you only have one operating system controlling the hardware or having access to the hardware at any given time. In virtualization, that type of technology allows more than one operating system to be running simultaneously on the same hardware platform. Well, virtual mode, or actually virtual XP mode, was a way that they allowed you to virtualize your application and run it in the context of XP, kind of like compatibility mode, but essentially you would be running it in an operating system within an operating system, giving you the ability to continue to use those XP-based applications that knew nothing about the user account control or that different architecture, as well as the file structures, right, and paths that have changed. Now, the next thing that we have here is also something known as Easy Transfer. This is the Windows Easy Transfer, and this is a great thing, is as you are upgrading from one operating system to the next, you might want to save things like, well, your applications. You might want to save things like your data, and you might want to make sure that they are loaded up into the same locations when you move from one edition of Windows to the next. Well, that's where the Windows Easy Transfer comes in. Windows Easy Transfer allows you a very intuitive, wizard-driven interface in which you can transfer those settings, those files, if you will, from the old Windows edition or the old Windows version to, let's say, Windows 7. In fact, let me show you here. And it's also in Windows Vista, too. I just happen to be kind of more focused on Windows 7.
Love this thing, by the way. I mean, this, as you're an A+ technician, you're probably going to be working with home users quite a bit as you get into the business. And this is something you're going to need to do. They buy a new computer. They want to transfer their files from the old computer to the new. This thing makes it so easy. The wizard really works well. I really thought this was a home run for Microsoft.
It really was, in fact, let me go ahead and as I'm talking about it, we'll mention it. All I'm doing is typing in Windows, and if I type in Windows Easy, I don't know what Easty is, but Easy, we can see Windows Easy Transfer here, and I'll go ahead and launch this up, and you can see one of the things that it allows you to do, right? Transfer user documents, or user accounts, documents, music, pictures, and I love the fact that Dan mentioned that you're buying a new computer, right? Or a customer comes in, they're buying a new computer. We want to take all of this information that you see in this list and we want to move it to the new instance of the computer. Or how about this? How about the reason they're buying a computer is because the old one's failed, right? Or the old one is failing, right? It's problematic in any way. This is such a great thing that I can run this type of wizard. Now, they also made it even easier than this, in fact, that you can get a Windows Easy Transfer USB-based cable, and you could plug it from one end to one end, and I mean one computer to the next. Windows would recognize it as a wet cable, Windows Easy Transfer cable, and it would start the process for you. Completely automated, and I wouldn't even have to worry about the wizard. So hence the name, very easy, right? So, and we could tell Windows Easy Transfer, okay, next.
I guess that makes sense for them to make it as easy as possible for you to continue to use their product.
Yeah, most definitely, because that means you'll just come back and buy more,
That's
right?
That's right.
And you notice that you have a series of options, right? There's the Easy Transfer cable, right? The wet cable that I was talking about. I could transfer this to the network, right? So if you're in a business type environment, maybe you transfer it to a network share, right? A shared folder or a resource where everybody can gain access to it over the network. Or we could use some kind of external USB-based device that you would plug into the machine, and you could transfer these files over there, right? So Windows Easy Transfer, very, very good way. A lot easier than some of the other corporate level transferring systems that you have, like the user state migration tool. And we'll mention that in another episode. All right, so some of the other things that we have what are known as the administrative tools. And the great thing about administrative tools is they are in control panel. Just pay attention to which operating system that you are in. Keep in mind that we have already said in Vista, it is, you go to the Start button, Control Panel, and it is You remember it's system and maintenance inside of really Windows 7 and beyond. You'll see system and security. So for instance, let me show you. If I go to the Start button and I choose Control Panel, System and Security, we have administrative tools right here. Right? I can also do this inside of Vista. I can go to the Start button. I can go to Control Panel. A little bit different, remember, System and Maintenance. And if I scroll all the way down, look, we've got administrative tools. And you can see a different coat of paint, but for the most part, they're pretty much the same thing. And you know what? Why not? We'll knock it out of the ballpark here, too.
The trifecta.
That's right, absolutely. We'll right-click on the Windows tile there. It's not really the Windows Start button, if you will. We can choose Control Panel here. We choose Control Panel. You'll see when Control Panel opens up, notice that it's System and Security as well. So just like Windows 7, it keeps it a little bit easier for you guys and gals out there. And then if we scroll down at the bottom, notice we also have Administrative Tools. And there again, here are Administrative Tools, right? So Administrative Tools, we're going to look a little bit more at these. So we just kind of give you a high-level overview. We'll talk about these in later episodes coming up because you'll have to know a little bit more about what each one of these tools use. But this is a really good location for almost just about any administrative functionality that you have to perform on a computer, whether it be maintaining the upkeep of the computer, whether it be performing recovery, whether it be automating things, whether it be managing your storage devices. You have a ton of different things here in administrative tools. So know a little bit about them, know where to find them as well. All right. All right, let's see, what else do we got? We have what's known as Windows Defender, all right? And I'm going to go ahead and, yes, I'm going to show you exactly how to get to Windows Defender, and we're going to go the scenic route. Again, it's one of those things that you have to know on the exam. So we're going to go ahead, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Start button, and we're going to go back to Control Panel. And I want to talk about this little setting right here. Notice there's category. This is called a category view, view by category, large and small icons. Now, you'll see in the exam objectives, they actually mention something known as category and classic view. Well, you used to have classic view inside of Vista. Here's the thing. After Vista, they no longer call it classic view or category view. Again, here's your category view. Notice it's no different than Windows 7 or Windows 8.1. But they also had what's called a classic view. And this is the classic view is what a lot of people like, right? Because
you mean
if
the
I
right
choose
view?
The right view. See, you got somebody who's been in systems administration for quite a few years. This is why they call it. A lot of people like it because some people find that, or just have the opinion that category view is like a door in front of a door that leads to another door that leads to a door that finally leads you to the utility that you want. Where classic view, everything is opened up. We don't have these category views. We've got it alphabetized from A to Z. Here are all the utilities that I need to get to. However, I will tell you that once they moved away from Vista, it was called the same thing in XP, classic view versus category view. Once they moved away from Vista, it's called category view or large icons, small icons. Don't let that trip you up on the exam because as you can see, we're doing the same thing. From A to Z, this is what we find, right? And long intro into something known as Windows Defender, right? Windows Defender is called out, and if we launch up Windows Defender, oh, it looks like it's turned off. Let's go ahead and just click, let's turn it on. They give you the ability to choose what kind of anti-malware software you want to run. So you might see that, like for instance here, by default, it isn't turned on. Windows Defender, and again, it's just giving you that choice. We'll let this go ahead and run, and we'll also show you the same thing here. Inside of your Windows 8.1 machine, if I switch from category view, and I'll just do this large icons for my 4 eyes, it works great. Notice that I also have Windows Defender here as well. Now Windows Defender inside of Windows 8 and beyond is turned on by default. Notice it didn't tell me to turn off. When Windows Defender first got integrated into the operating system like this, they give you the ability, again, to make your choice at what you want to run. Here they say, okay, we'll secure it by default, and if you want to install something, you'll install something and then come back and turn it off later, because some people wouldn't even do this. And again, it's better to have a little bit of protection than have no protection at all and something causes problems. And that's essentially what Windows Defender allows you to do. It allows you to go through here. We can update our spyware definition, our definitions in general, if you will, virus definitions, and we get an anti-malware service. We can run scans. We can schedule scans inside of here. So be aware of Windows Defender. Now, in that same line of thinking here, you also have what's known as the Windows Firewall. And I'll go ahead and stay in Windows 8.1. We haven't been giving Windows 8.1 too much attention in the features here, so let's kind of get you familiar with that as well. If I go to Control Panel and I go to System and Security, notice that we have the Windows Firewall right here, and I can choose that. And inside of the Windows Firewall, remember what a firewall does. A firewall is a way that I can allow or block, right? So I can allow information or communications to come in through over the network, in through the network adapter, and communicate with the operating system. And likewise, on the reverse side of this, I can allow a communication outbound from this computer across the network, across the internet, if you will, and we can either, allow or deny. We can make what are known as exceptions. Right now, why do they call them exceptions? Well, because the default rule says that every bit of information that comes into your computer is blocked, except those applications that you allow, hence the term exceptions, right? So we have a very basic functionality that we can allow an application or a feature to communicate, if you will, through the firewall, and that means inbound, right? All outbound communications from my computer to other computers over the network or over the internet is going to be allowed by default. All right, and you can see that I have to be an administrative user. Remember, one of the things we talked about, the user account control blocks you from, key security settings being modified in any way, right? And if I want to change these, I can do so. We'll go ahead and allow this to, change, and you'll notice they're no longer grayed out. And let's say, for instance, I wanted to allow remote desktop, right? I wanted to make a connection from another computer over the network back to this one. It's blocked by default, except, again, exceptions, if I say, yeah, I'm going to allow remote desktop to communicate, right? Now, that's not the only thing that we would have to do. If we were going to allow remote desktop to communicate as well, we'd also have to come in here to the system properties by right-clicking, in this case, Windows 8.1. It would be your start tile, or Windows tile, if you will. Start button, you just push start, if you will. Then you'll go to Control Panel, again, security, system and security, and then system. I'm just going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm going to right-click and just choose system. And then notice that we have in our system properties, like we've already showed you how to locate this. I have remote settings. By default, remote desktop that allows me to essentially go to another computer, connect back to this one, and take control over the desktop and work with it just like I'm sitting right here in front of it. By default, it is disabled, and I would have to enable that. The other one is something known as remote assistance, and a remote assistance is a way that I could share control of the desktop. Let's say Dan is helping me out because I've got an application. I can't figure out how to work it. I can't get it configured. Well, I could actually send an invitation to Dan and say, Dan, I need some remote assistance. I wouldn't have to say that, but that's what it's called. And Dan could connect to my computer, and we could share control, which means he could see what I'm seeing, I could see what he's doing, and allow him to walk me through the app. The difference here is in remote desktop, what we end up doing is we're actually taking control over the desktop. So if Dan uses remote desktop to connect to my computer over the network, I'm going to get logged out, right? It's no different than doing a local login. So essentially, that's a little bit about remote desktop in the same breath that we're talking about allowing applications through the firewall. It is a feature of Windows, and it is one that you want to be aware of, as well as the basic firewall. Now, if you wanted to get a little bit more advanced, you have a lot more granular control by using something known as the Windows Firewall with advanced settings, but we'll save that for our security location, or our security episodes here in 902, because we're not quite there yet. Now, in Windows Vista, they had what was known, and timeout period, it looks like it's turned off. I have to turn the Windows Defender service off. It looks like it's been disabled. That's one of the issues that you might have here. Now, the other thing that we also have to understand is that inside of, for instance, your Windows Vista machines, right, you have what's known as Security Center. All right, and Security Center would allow you the ability to control key security settings and see them kind of at a quick glance. I do want to kind of differentiate this from another type of security piece of software that we have. Security Center is in Vista. When they moved into Windows 7 and beyond, they changed it a little bit. It's no longer called Security Center. If we go to Start, we go to Control Panel, and change this back to Category View there. And go to System and Security. Notice that they have what's now called the Action Center, right? So They don't call that out on the exam, but it's doing the same thing. Notice I can see security, and if I expand this out, I can see a lot of the key security settings in Action Center. Notice that they do call out on your exam objectives for 902 Security Center, and specifically that's something in Vista. We still have that technology today, but like we've kind of been stressing here, sometimes Microsoft puts a new coat of paint over technology that's been around a while, and they change the name on it. And that's essentially what you have here. All right, let's see, Dan. Well, you know, I said we might be able to round it up in this one, but it does look like we still have more. So it looks like we might have to go into a part 4, but I don't think we're going to do it right here.
No, definitely Wes is a big fat liar. So, but what are you going to do, right? We work with what we got. No, we're Kid the West, having a good time. It's just a lot of information when it comes to Windows because it's such a fully featured operating system, so it takes a while. We want to make sure that you good folks out there that are watching get your money's worth and understand every piece of minutia that this exam is going to call out for you. So we're going to take our time and we're going to work our way through it. And if that means going into a part 4, well, by goodness, we're going into a part 4. So join us for that. Hopefully you've enjoyed part 3 so far, but it is time for us to sign off. For IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Daniel Lowry.
And I'm Wes, Never Stop Talking Brian.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.